I'm going to start the afternoon session now, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest speakers for the second half of the day. They're from Japan. On my right I have Dr. Takeshi Aoki, and he's going to give the first part of their joint presentation, and he will be followed by his colleague, Professor Yan, who has come from China. And I will tell you a little bit about each of them just as they're about to give their talks. Professor Takeshi Aoki is from Tokyo University, and he went there initially to pursue an academic career in Islamic studies. But he tells me that at some point in his pursuit of research, he came across an Iranian mystic, and from that point he became interested in Zoroastrian matters and Zoroastrian ideas, and that has taken him into his now main interest, which is Zoroastrianism. So it is my great pleasure to welcome him today. He's taken the trouble to come from Kyoto University. It has not been easy to arrange the visit of himself and his colleague. A lot of things were still up in the air until very recently, and we lived in hope that he would come, and here he is. So I'm very pleased to welcome him. He has come with his student, who's also an avid and interested researcher in Zoroastrian matters, and so I'm looking forward immensely, as I'm sure you are, to hearing what Dr. Takeshi Aoki is going to tell us today. I believe his main interest has been in Sassanian Zoroastrianism, but he's also let me know that there is a living community of Zoroastrians in Japan, and maybe he will give us some insight into that as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Aoki, for the invitation.
Today's title of our presentation is The Sideline Zoroastrianism and Policy Zoroastrianism in the Far East. The first part, the sideline Zoroastrianism, is covered by me, and the latter part, Policy Zoroastrianism in the Far East, is covered by Professor Yang. And then, the first chapter. From a point of view, from the Far Eastern scholars' view, there is many types of Zoroastrianism in the development of this religion. For example, A. The spontaneous personal Zoroastrianism. B. Gothic group Zoroastrianism. C. New Avestan Zoroastrianism. D. Masjid Zoroastrianism. E. Bekhradnia Indian Zoroastrianism. F. Armenian Zoroastrianism. D. Supports Persian Zoroastrianism. H. Persian Zoroastrianism. I. Fudan Zoroastrianism. And J. Sinai Zoroastrianism, and so on. This time, we would like to pick up among those variants of Zoroastrianism the Sinai Zoroastrianism and policy for Eastern Zoroastrianism in Shanghai. Generally speaking, Zoroastrianism is a religion of Aryan people. But there is one exception. From 9th century to the 14th century, this religion was introduced from Iranian plateau and Central Asia to the mainland of China, and there it was strictly Sinaiized and believed by some of Chinese people. This is a very interesting phenomenon in the history of Zoroastrianism all over the world. So we select this Sinaiized Zoroastrianism as our theme today. Okay. Okay. Chapter 2, the Sinaiized Zoroastrianism, Section 1. Chinese historical documents, namely New Tang book or the story on Sassanian royal family in China. The Sassanian last emperor, Yazid III, after defeated at Nehavand in 642, was murdered at Mary in 651. But according to Chinese documents, his second son, Pero, or in Chinese and Japanese pronunciation, Piru, safely fled to Chang'an, namely the great capital of the Tang Dynasty Chinese Empire. That may be the largest megalopolis all over the world at that time. The Tang Dynasty's third emperor, Cao gave Pharaoh a support army, by which Pharaoh and his boy, Narseh, once recovered Shizryong. But unfortunately, this town is supposed in eastern Iran or Central Asia, but its real place is unfortunately unknown. Some Japanese scholars supposed it was Zarang, the famous Shahrestane or Stane Sistan, but there is no real argument to support it. And once recovered this unknown town in 661 for a very short time. But after Muslim armies counterattack, led by our famous Qutayba ibn Muslim, Pharaoh and Narseh and Chinese army were pushed to return to Chang'an. Then Pharaoh died in 707 at the famous Persian temple, with Chinese Emperor Cao kindly built for Zoroastrian in 677. Narseh, the grandson of Yazid III and the legitimate Sassanian emperor now, didn't give up his Persian empire and Zoroastrianism. He invaded again to Toharistan and maybe Central Asia, more exactly northern part of Afghanistan and southern part of today's Uzbekistan, with Chinese army to reconstruct the Sassanian dynasty. And this time, he miraculously succeeded to maintain his control there for 20 years. But finally, Muslim army drove him out from Central Asia, and Narseh, while returning to Chang'an, died somewhere in Central Asia. Please see the map of the first map on the page of 4. The Sassanian family once fled into China and counterattacked to the Iranian break, and again fled into China, then counterattacked to Iran, and finally fled to China. So they made pistol movement on 3 times. But with Sassanian exiled aristocrats, however, for almost 1 century long, Sassanian Persian culture and Soviet merchant culture continued to flourish in the Far East. The last Sassanian family, whom Chinese records refer to, is Khosrow. He lived at least in 728 in Chang'an. Then please see the Sassanian royal family tree in China. Yazid III was died at Mel, and his second son Pero was died at Shanghai, and his boy Narseh maybe died at Toharistan, and Khosrow. I don't know who is his parent or who is his brother, but he died after 728 at maybe China. Then second part, Persian and Sassanian Zoroastrian culture in China. The Sassanian exiled aristocrats and Sassanian merchants brought with them 2 types of Zoroastrianism, namely Persian Zoroastrianism and Sassanian Zoroastrianism into China. Chinese people at that time unable to recognize separately both types of Zoroastrianism and other religions, namely Manichaeism and Nestorianism, favored for their exoteric characters. Then, Chinese famous poets refer to their Zoroastrian motifs so usually in the Tang period. For example, I picked up 3 ancient Chinese poems. Those poems were taught for Japanese high school students, but it is much better to pronounce it in Chinese rather than Japanese. So please, Professor Yang, to read those Chinese poems roughly in modern Chinese pronunciation. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not good at reciting the poem, but I will try to do my best. The first poem, 少年行，作者是李白。50年少，惊异宿，银鞍白马度春风。落花踏尽游何处？笑入胡骑酒肆中。
Yeah. And I read it in Japanese pronunciation. Number 1. 少年校、李白、五両の年少、金一頭につき、銀杏白馬に春風渡る。落下踏むところ、いずれに遊ぶかを知らず、笑って入る趣旨の道。
The second one. 葡萄美酒夜光杯，欲饮琵琶马上催。醉卧沙场君莫笑，古来征战几人回。
And I read it in Japanese pronunciation. 領収詩、王冠、ぶどうの美酒、夜行の杯、酔うて砂上に伏す君笑うなかれ。飲んで美は馬上にも酔う。古来聖戦、行く人が帰る。
Okay, the third point. 胡人吹笛荣楼间，楼上萧条海月间。借问梅花繁几曲，重逢一夜满关山。Excuse me, Mrs. Shahin want you to translate it into English.
We want to have a meaning. So friends here may be able to help us.
Wow, this is written in older Chinese text, so it's not the kind that we come up to speak. I will give you a very brief sort of translation. The first one is youth, young people, sort of on a parade. There are young people on a parade, and they are riding on white horses with silver saddles, and they are riding among the winds of spring, and the horses are stepping on flower petals that have fallen from the trees, and they are laughing and going into pubs with women who are coming from the west, who have come from the west. That's the first one. The second one, wine of grapes in illuminated glasses, and they had people playing the Chinese pipa, which is a plucked instrument, and their songs are sort of egging them on. And when they are drunk and lying about in battlefields, please do not laugh at them, because how many return from battlefields since ancient times? That's the second one. The third one, Western people, again people who had come from the West, were playing their flutes in towers, you know, like towers of gates. They are higher up, they are on on walls. So they are towers, but they are military towers. Fortresses. Watchtowers. Yes, watchtowers, thank you. And the view of where they are looking out is somewhere in between the moon and the sea. And they are asking the plum blossoms how many times they can sing. And the answer came from the wind, is that in one night they all blossom. So that's it.
Thank you for your translation. Nice translation in English. And adding to those ancient Chinese poems, there are some supposed ancient Japanese poems on the same motif. And adding to those literature, there is at least 6 Zoroastrian fire temples in the China megalopolis. Please see the map 2, China megalopolis of the Tang period and Persian fire temples there. According to Chinese official documents, in the time of Kaosong, among the China megalopolis, there is total 21 Buddhist temples and total 8 Taoist temples and total 6 Zoroastrian fire temples. So, at this Tang Dynasty period, Persian Zoroastrianism and Fudan Zoroastrianism are so flourished in Chinese mainland. And section 3. The popularity of Iranian culture in the 7th century China and maybe in Japan is the prerequisite for the finalized Zoroastrianism mentioned below. In the Tang period, there were Zoroastrian fire temples only in the colonies of exiled Persian aristocrats and Soviet merchants in the northern China and in megalopolis Chang'an. Later, however, such religious sites also appeared in the mainland of China. For example, Kaifeng. Kaifeng is the capital of the Song dynasty, and the Zhenchang, etc., where no Persians and no Soviets were found. With this, the Zoroastrian fire temples were gradually assimilated into the Chinese religion in the Song period and became accepted Chinese belief. Then Persian and Fudan Zoroastrianism in the Tang period were absorbed into Chinese religion in the Song period. And the believer is changed from Persian and Fudan people to Chinese people. So at this time, Zoroastrianism was not only Aryan people's religion, but also became the son of Chinese people's religion. This finalized Zoroastrianism has some characteristics as below. Number 1, sacrifice for some type of Zoroastrian god figure. This practice may be influenced by Fudan Zoroastrianism, because, as you know, that in the Sassanian dynasty, Tang prohibits the animal sacrifice, prohibit the god figure and democratic movement. So, this special character of finalized Zoroastrianism may be influenced by, not from Persian Zoroastrianism, but by Fudan Zoroastrianism. And number 2, in Yuan period, the common expression that Zoroastrian temple is on fire means immoral love affair in Chinese literature. This reason is supposed that Zoroastrian next of kin marriage gives the heavy impression of immoral love in China. Then my part is finished. The third part will be continued by Professor Yang.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's going to be, go ahead.
Now, we are going to hear Professor Kejia's continuation of the information about what's been happening in China since the flight of Yazd III and what's been happening since. Professor Yan, as you can see from the handout, works at Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, having begun his interest in generally the history of Western philosophy. And through his studies on the history of Western philosophy, he had come across Zoroastrianism. I have not heard Professor Yan in the past, but I have been told he's a very excellent speaker, and he will inform us, I'm sure, about aspects of Zoroastrianism that will take over from Dr. Aoki. We're looking forward very much to your presentation. I believe you're going to use PowerPoint to help us on our way, and I hope that the technology is working and you're able to use it happily. Are you ready for us now?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I will hand over to you then. Thank you very much, Professor Yan.
Good afternoon, everybody. And it's my pleasure to be here to share with you my research about the Parsi community in Shanghai. And first of all, please forgive my very bad English. But it's one privilege for me myself. I can have my excuse when you ask me some difficult question. Oh, sorry. No, I need another file. Well, my topic is the multitudes of the memory of the Parsi community in Shanghai since 1843. Actually, as we know, there are a lot of Parsi pioneers before the Shanghai community, and since 19th century. But earlier than that, there is some historical accounts written by Abu Zaid, son of Shiraz, in 10th century. In his account of China, he said that a rebellion led by Huang Chao killed 120,000 Muslims, Jews, Christians, and Parsis. This paragraph is I get it from 19th century English translation, and some people argue that the Parsi here used is not related to the Parsi from the west coast of India. So probably this Parsi is the Iranian Zoroastrians. Yes, I agree that. And also in 1756, Kiraji Jivanji Regimani and his brother Manchuji start for China. They are from India, definitely. It was merely one of similar adventurous sailings among his co-religionists then, and it probably never occurred to him that the Regimanists could have become the Parsis who first settled in China. In contrast with their co-religionists who came over to China for their China trade, the Regimanists was the first Parsi who was permitted to stay in Canton and become rich through the trade to China. So I think it's an example of the diaspora of Parsi for the following centuries. Of course, another well-known example is Sir Jamsetji Jujubhoy, the business prince and first Indian baronet in 19th century. And the third, we can find, and in the first half of 19th century, the Parsi merchant in Canton saw the uprising of the triangle trade between Great Britain, India, and China, especially the opium trade. The fourth, many Parsi families involved the China trade and have their firms and traders in Canton, such as Cama, Banajis, and Wadias, and some other names I list here. So, as one of scholar comment, the most valuable branch of the commerce of Bombay is the China trade. The fifth, we also got some, but those Parsis in Canton also suffered greatly from the Opium War. Around the Opium War, they are banned to sell the opium to Chinese people. And they have to hand over all his opium to the government, and the government destroy it in Canton. So the question is, did they withdraw from Canton or China forever? Some scholars in China believe that with the decline of the China trade, the Parsi also withdraw from China, especially they withdraw from Canton. They went to Hong Kong and some other cities. But I don't think this is the truth. I think after the Opium War, with the opening of the treaty party, including Shanghai and Ningbo and some other cities in South China, the Parsi continue to come to this new land to seek their fortune. I say this is based on some resources. The first resource is a review of the origin and the growth of the Shanghai Parsi Cemetery trustee funds. This is written by Shanghai Parsi Cemetery trustee in 1935, printed by a Chinese printing. And in the introduction of this book, the writer says that they collect a lot of accounting books, a lot of record of conference, annual conference, and many other materials in Gujarati. Because of the lack of the difficulty of the printing technique in Shanghai, they translate these materials in Gujarati into English and write this book. And this book is for private circle, of course. And the second resource is an interview I did in 2000 with a senior researcher in my institute. The title is Interview with Mr. Han Shaoshen, who was born in 1911. He is a Chinese Catholic employee of a Parsi company then the Shanghai Parsi Cemetery. This is a published interview I did it in 1999. So the third material I do my research is interviews with Jakuka, the Mobet, once worked as a full-time priest in Shanghai through 1931 to 1945. The fourth book is Indian in China. This is written by Madhavi Thampi. This is a very brilliant book, but unfortunately, the author never talk about the Parsis in Shanghai. Also, we have got many other materials scattered in articles from many scholars all over the world, and I and some of my colleagues collected these articles in a Chinese book. We translated these articles into Chinese. The book is Foreigners in Shanghai or Shanghai 的外国人. It was published in 2006. So also we have got a lot of many other relative information books, interviews, archive, photos, etc. So So let me say something about the establishment of the Parsi trustee funds in Shanghai. First, in 1847, the Bujurji, one of the first 5 Parsis who came to Shanghai, bought a land from Shanghai local government through a British merchant. And by 1854, they have already established 8 firms in Shanghai. This figure is only next to the British firms, which is 27. And in 1860s, there were 2 Parsi companies in Shanghai trading cotton and opium. So as a Chinese scholar comments, in early years of the opening of Shanghai, economical activity of Indian merchants should not be ignored. And the Indian merchants, meaning here is the Parsi, because as far as we know, there is no other Indian ethnic group living in Shanghai at that time. In 1854, the cemetery funds established, symbolizing the formation of the Parsi diaspora community in Shanghai. Shanghai Parsi brought a piece of land measuring 10 mo, partly for burial purpose, partly for religious use at Chinese money 603. They bought the land at the Fuzhou Road from Blue Lotus Tea House, which was bankrupt then. And I should say that the Fuzhou Road is at the center of the British concession at that time. Other 2 pieces of land was owned successively by trustee funds. One is at the Hongqiao Road, and the other one is at the Xinza Road. In contrast with the Parsi in Canton, Parsi women began to sail for Shanghai to join their families rather than the Parsi earlier than 1842, when the Parsi traders in China usually come back to Bombay to join their family every 2 or 3 years. And also there is some sayings that the Parsi in Canton have some relation with some Chinese women, which has not a good reputation. So the trustee funds become a self-governance organization of the Parsi in Shanghai, treating both religious and secular affairs in Shanghai. This is a little bit thing as far as I see is, which is quite different with the Parsi community in Canton. In 1872, the first trust deed has been registered at the British consulate, in which regulations on the nomination of the trustees, the management of the properties, and the administration of the income thereof have been given. And also this deed has been updated in 1911. So according to one of the clauses, since I have got the PPT text, I will not repeat it again. But what I want to ask is that there are expression Iranian Zoroastrians in Shanghai. Does it mean that actually there is some Iranian Zoroastrian in Shanghai at that time? This is the only material mentioning this phenomena, and I have not found other materials so far about this fact. Another fact is the Parsi community in Shanghai stressed on the religious use of the inclusion, like in other places. This is very popular in the Parsi trustee fund all over the world. And another thing that is very interesting is that the complex is available exclusive for the Zoroastrians, and this made it impossible for them to spread their religion among Chinese people. Let me shift from the self-governance group to the worshiping place. A praying hall has established in 1866, which was the Parsi worshiping place that has ever had throughout all history in Far East. This is very important since as we know, we have got more than 1,000 years of the Zoroastrianism in China. According to some materials, it's very difficult to find some definite material to demonstrate that we have the fire temple in China. This is one of the things we can say, that this is one of the very definite demonstration of the establishment of the fire temple in China. And this praying hall is renovated in 1932 for 80 anniversaries of the trustee funds in 1934. Also, many other Indians and Parsis visited the Parsi trustee funds, like Taigo and some other famous maybe Zoroastrians all over the world in different kind of part of the world visit Shanghai and visit the Parsi. And this is the original site of the Parsi praying hall. I will tell you now there is no more the praying hall, but I will explain the reason later. And also, I remember that, perhaps you remember that I said the Parsi trustee firm bought land from tea house, Blue Lotus tea house. This one is the Blue tea house. Original site. Still we have this kind of tea house, but actually at that time the tea house is a very complicated. It is not a very a place with reputation, and lower class people gathering there have their tea, and also there are some prostitutes. Sorry.
The new change.
Let's see the religious life of the Parsi in Shanghai. In early years, Parsi ceremonies such as Najutis and Gesana are performed voluntarily by the members who have received religious training in Ahuran. And in 1931, when Jakuka the first Morbed came from Madrasa in Bombay, he worked there as a full-time priest till 1945. And also the children from Zoroastrians came to Shanghai to perform the Najutis from inland China cities like Beijing, Tianjin, Hankou, and some other cities from Japan. This is Jakuka, who was born in 1909, and I should say he is still alive till last year, because last year I received the invitation from his wife and he himself to attend his 100-year anniversary in Mumbai. Surely, and also everyone knows who is sitting beside him. Oh, and yeah, another one. From Jakuka, I know many things about the history of the Parsi community here and there in Shanghai, and I will tell you later, a bit later, and I would like to say something about some story about in the eye of Parsis living in Shanghai. This is perhaps we know this is a very famous photographer, Sam Tata, who was born in Shanghai. And this is a very brief biography of Saint Tang. And so let's go through it. So actually, as I mentioned, he met another very famous photographer from France, whose name is Bresson, in 1948 in Mumbai, and they become friendly soon. And also, Santata is influenced by Bresson, and their photograph has a very specific character. That is this decisive movement. They just snap some very impressive scenes to describe some great events. So this is a photograph picture that taken by Bresson, and it is those people crowded for buying in some gold at that time, because the money is not money anymore then. So also let me see some more Tatar's decisive moments about Shanghai. And this is an album published in 1980s, which is taken by some Tatar. And through his photograph, we can find what the imagination and what the Shanghai is in a Parsi eye or in a Parsi mind. And this is foreigners living in Shanghai withdrew just before 1949. Another picture is some people coming or go out from Shanghai, and in front of us are two Republican soldiers, and on the behind you can see two policemen. And also this is another picture taken by some Tatar. This is a communist party, and he is on trial and will be executed only 1 month after Shanghai is liberated by the PLA. And also you can find some Republican soldier withdraw from Shanghai, and the parade of for celebrating the liberation of Shanghai, and some propagandas by the soldier. And also you can find that Tata not only paid his attention to some great events, also he also sees something that is very detailed in what happened in Shanghai. Also some advertisement like, and at that time still the foreigners. This is a screen. This is the scene of the French club, and you can see the foreigners just enjoy their life. Even the Shanghai has been taken over by the Communist Party. Yes, we do have some foreigners that Catholic nuns live in Shanghai at that time around 1949. Yeah, let's see another Parsi and what he is thinking about image Shanghai. This is another Parsi I interviewed in 2000 when I was conducting my research there. Supported by Ford Foundation, and he is a Parsi born in Shanghai in 1936, and his brother at that time is the president of the trustee fund of Hong Kong, and both these two boys was born in Shanghai. But unfortunately I didn't get many things from this interview, but only one thing he told me, that he just remember a very dirty Chinese word. This is only one thing remained in his mind. Yeah, he is true Parsi and true Shanghainese because he can speak that word in Shanghainese, not only in Chinese. But still, I got a lot of many interesting things. This is the certificate of his birth certificate, and it indicated that through this certificate we can imagine the average people there in Shanghai at that time. Average Parsi. His mother gave his birth in a very, very expensive hospital run by a German, that is Baolong Hospital. And he and his family lived in western part of Shanghai, which is maybe like London is the west part, is a very expensive area. So I think the average Parsi living in Shanghai is lived a very higher life there. Okay, let's shift to the Parsi in the eye of a Chinese employee. Yes, this is based on my interview with the employee of the trustee fund of Parsi in Shanghai. First of all, I would like to cite some Chinese terminologies when he used to describe Parsi. The Shanghai Parsi Cemetery trustee, he gave a very typical Chinese word that is 波斯公署. If you understand Chinese, probably you know this is a very old, very traditional translation. And he translate. Usually we translate Parsi directly from the pronunciation into Chinese according to the pronunciation. But in his language, he gave a very useful, very correct translation. That is the minority of Persian. So I think his translation is proper. And also he has the Parsi praying hall. He gave us another translation which is quite different with what we used in the scholastic circle. That is Baitoli Baitan. That is the worshipping hall by the white turbaned person. Najut. He gave us a very, very typical Shanghainese expression. And I should say he is a Catholic, and he also used the Catholic term to describe the Najut. And the first one, Zoroastrian, this is very acoustic. But and Zoroastrian is not a popular saying at present Chinese. It is a very old Shanghainese expression. So when he first mentioned this word, I just get confused, and I asked him to write it down so that I can understand what the Zoroastrian is. Also, he is afraid of maybe he afraid that I cannot understand what the Kokusti is, what the Najuti is. He used the Catholic term, saying this is something like a first communion. I'm not sure if it is right. And also, he gave us a very, very good translation of the name of President Trustee Fund in Shanghai, Talati. He used a I think it's a very good Chinese expression, 太蓝田. So please permit me to recite several words of the Parsi's religious life as described by this Chinese person. I will translate it into English a little bit. About their religious, I know very few, but because at that time I just work and I didn't do any research regarding to his religion. According to his family, his wife every day prayed every day at least 2 hours, and also he recited the scripture. She used the Afrikaner with a larger up and also with a foot, just like our checklist. But it is a little bit smaller than the checklist, and also it has a very big plate. They usually burn the sandalwood and with the carbon, and also they use the frankincense. When they recite the script, they put some frankincense on the Afrikaner. When she began to recite, she will keep silence, and he will never say anything. If you have anything to ask her, she just give you the gesture to express his meaning. And according to their rule, when they are praying, nobody should interrupt them. Once upon a time, my boss forgot to get something from the family. He asked me to fetch it for him. I say to his wife where this thing is in the home. He just keep his mouth closed and never say anything. And the maiden said that usually at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, his wife will recite the scripture. This is what a Chinese image the religious life of the Parsi in Shanghai at that time. So perhaps everyone remembers the Santa Claus photograph taken in around 1949. I just wonder why he didn't take any pictures about the Parsi community there, about the Parsi community in Shanghai. Maybe the Parsi community is not a very great event which is happened in that period. But still, we have another answer about that. The question is, when did the Parsi withdraw from Shanghai? As Professor John Hinnos believes that in his book published by Ashgate in 2000, he says that Parsi withdrew from China, like Shanghai and some other cities, in 1949 after the communists take over China. But according to my research, it is not true. First, I would like to cite the testimony of Jakuka. This is the original words First, I translated into Chinese. He says, in December 26, 1945, organized by British authority, I went back to Mumbai. When I left everything in Shanghai except one shirt in my body. This is because a serious conflict between Labor Party of Clement Attlee and the Republic in China, because it was in 1945 when the Japanese-China War ended. The Republican China take over almost all the land of China. And furtherly, they just want to take back Hong Kong. That is why China and conflict with the Greater Britain at that time. So actually, 5 earlier than the liberation, Parsi with other British citizens withdraw from most city of China. So what happened afterwards? I mean, after 1949. Also, I can get some traces from interview with Han Shaosen. He said one thing: Talati, the president of trustee funds, did not return to Mumbai until 1952. He also said that why he returned to Mumbai so late, because still there are some Parsis living in Shanghai. The number is fewer, even though the number is fewer than before. The other thing is seems very interesting is that the lands in Hongqiao Road and Xinza Road owned by the Parsi community have been sold to the borough of Shanghai municipal government, except the one at the Fuzhou Road, where the trustee funds and the praying hall located. Still, we have got 3 employees by the trustee funds to take charge of the buildings and collect rentals for the Parsis, and the money was handed to India Consulate General at Shanghai till 1966. And in 1966, the Red Guard took over the praying hall, burned down the complex and the library and the bookshelves, and destroyed the cemetery. But only 1 year later, the complex has been taken back by the local government and the Revolutionary Committee. It was then used by a community factory for those young employed people who has not been sent to the villages for various reasons. And this is the end of the history. In 1992, the empty buildings are demolished for infrastructure construction. So let's go to some conclusions. The first one is that the Parsi community in Shanghai is a metaphor of the energies and ambitions of the Parsi as an ethnic group in the world. The second thing is that the Parsi in Shanghai kept a religious life with them from their homeland and also their cultural tradition. The third point is the Parsi praying hall in Shanghai has been the only Zoroastrian temple that can be confirmed in the 1,000 years of Zoroastrianism in China. Last but not least, the self-governance of the Parsi community may also throw some light on the development of the expatriate groups here in Shanghai in 20th century, which are growing rapidly at the moment. Thank you very much.
The nearest mic, I'll give it to the nearest questioners here.
Professor Yang, we spoke a little earlier about 2 Parsi ladies who tried to just go over and upset by speaking in Chinese in front of their Parsi husband. I now recognize the name. It is in fact Talati. The other one I wish to ask is, what area of land does a Mao cover?
I forgot the interpreter.
Mao as in milestone. What area?
Yeah.
How many square feet?
How many, what dimensions of a mao? How big is a mao?
那个程度庙宇有多大？
我们说石木，我不知道现在石木长吗？这个
It's 10 acres.
10 acres.
But whether it's a metric acre or a
Hectare.
imperial acre,
It's still large.
yes,
Fair
it's 10 acres.
Thanks very much.
As I have the mic, I'm going to ask a question about the present-day community in Tokyo, Kobe. I have heard there is a Parsi, maybe a few people, maybe one person, and also I've heard of a lady, an 80-year-old lady called Hiroko Nishizawa. Do you know anything about this lady? And can you tell us something about the Kobe community in Japan?
Sorry, I don't have any information about Hiroko Nishizawa, but it's a typical Japanese name. Is she the person?
I've been asked by an Iranian friend to mention this lady Hiroko Nishizawa because we have heard in Iran about her having an interest in Zoroastrianism, if not herself being a Zoroastrian. So you know nothing about her. I will make inquiries. But can you tell us something about the Kobe Zoroastrians? Are there Zoroastrians in Kobe, Dr. Aoki?
Adding to Professor Yang information about Shanghai community, I can say something about the Kobe, the famous Japanese port city, Kobe's Parsi community. Since 19th century, there is a small community, small Parsi community came from Bombay, and they continue to live in Kobe for 3 or 4 generations. And still in Kobe, there are 10 or 20 families of Parsi. Some of them, one of the Parsi young lady, graduated the Japanese college, and she's now working as a journalist. Her main language is Japanese, and she's not famous in the Parsi community in Bombay and Iran, but her articles are very popular in Japanese women. And we have another Parsi doctor or Parsi lawyer in Kobe. But I believe in this room, there someone who has much information about Kobe Parsi community, or Yokohama Parsi community, or Tokyo Parsi community. So I would like to ask the someone to give me more information about Japanese Parsi community. Is there anyone who know about the Parsi community in Japan?
The question is, does anybody else know anything about the Japanese Parsi community? I suspect not, which is why it's very exciting to hear from you, but maybe...
My uncle, Hormusi Amrolia, was in Japan, but where, I don't know anything about it.
You must write down a name for them. Otherwise it won't be better.
Any other questions, please? One over there. You're going to say more, Joe?
No, I wanted to ask one question. What does Tanu, Urwan, these are the names manufactured by Japanese car, mean? Mazda.
Yes.
What do they mean in Japanese? In Japanese.
The Mazda is, exactly speaking, not Mazda, but its Japanese pronunciation is Matsuda. And this is a popular family name among Japanese people. The founder of the car maker Mazda is named Matsuda, but Matsuda is not convenient for foreign people to pronounce. So he changed the middle term from Tsu to Z. So So that company is called not Mazda, but Mazda.
What about Urwan and Tanu?
Tanu,
Tanu and Urwan.
Urwan. Urwan, as far as I know, Urwan is the ancient Avestan world.
But it is it's a make of car. So what does it mean?
Japanese car.
He doesn't know.
I don't know that Japanese car is called Urwan.
Okay, any other questions, please? I saw Lucy's hand is up there, so could you get it to Lucy, please? And then afterwards we'll try and get one round to Uma.
It was a very interesting description of the Parsis in Shanghai, but is it possible to give some idea of the total numbers that they were there to be able to call a community?
As far as I know, I just can give the number when the Parsi community prospered in 1930s. It is totally have 200 people there in Shanghai. But maybe this figure is one of the largest trustee farm, other than the Mumbai one, in the world. I mean, the diaspora group, maybe the largest one in the world.
Zanzibar was much bigger.
Are there any Zoroastrian Parsis in China today?
Yes, only individuals. Yeah, as far as I know, there is no permanent Parsi family in Shanghai, but we have got 6 families of Parsi in Beijing, and some of them are journalists working for some United newspapers. That's Boston Globe. Yeah, Boston Globe.
There's a restaurant there, Parsi restaurant.
Oh, yes.
Where?
In Shanghai. I have been in Shanghai.
No, I know there are a lot of Chinese restaurants in Mumbai run by Parsis.
I go to Persian princess. There is a Persian restaurant in Shanghai called Persian Princess. Persian Princess. It was a nightclub also. Yeah, I've been there last year.
Yes, there is some Persian restaurant, but is it a Zoroastrian restaurant? I'm not sure.
I don't know about
I'm not sure.
It is a Persian Princess restaurant. It's a mall, a very nice area.
Yeah. Also we do have some Indian restaurants run by some Indians from Mumbai. But as far as I know, there is no Parsi restaurant.
Next question.
I have actually a question for each of you. First, maybe Dr. Aoki. You mentioned in your text about the synolized Zoroastrianism, which has characteristics such as sacrifice for some type of Zoroastrian God's figure. I would be interested in what sort of God's figure, like how is it shaped, or how can I imagine that? And the question to Mr. Dr. Yan would be if you have any expertise in the field of Manichaeism, like the followers of Mani, because I've read in several sources about this Mani had a famous holy book where he used a lot of colors and drawings in order to support his or make it better understandable what he was teaching, his teachings actually. And there are only very few books have survived until today. And one of these books are apparently in China, in the Museum of China. I would like to know if you know anything about it, in which museum that would be visible, that book. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Sorry. Thank you for the question. But I have no idea about your question. Which animal the Chinese Zoroastrian sacrificed for the god figure? But after returning to Tokyo, I will read just ancient Chinese document more thoroughly. So I would like to send you email about your question. Is it okay?
Sure.
Please give me your email address.
Thank you for your question. My brief answer is that it is almost available for the mechanical sculpture in Chinese language because they are all published. They are all published, so it is not necessary for you to get it from any specific museum. You can find some books if you are interested in. And for your first question, the mechanism is a little bit popular in Song dynasties and some other dynasties, but it's very interesting that the mechanism did not survive, but it shifted in another form. What I would like to say, the popular religion in China.
Yeah, excuse me, with that, Professor, I've got another question for Professor Aoki. But what I would like to ask Professor, would that be the White Lotus set?
The White Lotus set?
White Lotus, would it be Manichaeism developing into the White Lotus in China?
White Lotus.
Would you want to answer the question?
Well, I'm sorry, I had two questions. Professor Aoki, was Songdian Zoroastrianism influential? Did it ever arrive in Nara dynasty, Nara Jedi?
So did it influence the Nara dynasty?
Yeah.
That's your question. Did Zoroastrianism influence the Nara dynasty? What is the Nara dynasty?
I'm sorry.
I thought you mean Narajida, by the word Narajida, you mean the Japanese dynasty?
Yes. I was wondering whether...
Thank you for your question. The Narajida means the Japanese ancient dynasty from the 7th century to the 10th century. Is it okay? Oh, thank you for the question. But the Song dynasty is from 960 to 1279. So Song dynasty Shinrai Zoroastrianism has no influence to Japanese Nara dynasty. But the Tang dynasty's Fudan Zoroastrianism may have much influence of Nara dynasty in Japan. So please refer to Professor Gikyo Ito's article written in Japanese. I have referred to it in bibliography. According to his opinion, some of Persian exiled aristocrats came to Japan in 700 in the 8th century and asked Japanese emperor to render Japanese army to recover the Persian Empire. But his argument depends on his decipherment of ancient Japanese poem and not definite conclusion. His conclusion is not definite. So this argument is still open now. Thank you.
Yes, I remember your question. So, actually, the White Lotus sector is to some extent it's a proper name for some popular religion that is opposed to the government. So I should say some of them are influenced by some mechanism, but they just adopt some names, some elements, but not the mechanism as a whole.
Where's the microphone? Can I get it to Professor Insta, please?
Hello, is it working? In early period, no?
Push it up.
It's okay.
I think it's, no, okay. Periodically in China, in olden days, census were conducted, right? Every 50, 100 years or so, documenting the existence of various ethnic people as well as religious people. Can we document through these censuses, right, the presence of Zoroastrians in China? That's through the Tang dynasty. Either one.
As far as I know, that we only find some fragmentary historical records about Zoroastrianism. And also you can find some official records, but not systematically. And is it your question?
Yeah, I mean, are these, I thought these censuses are all preserved. The census records.
No, not available.
Could I please ask Dr. Aoki about Shintoism, specifically the sun goddess, or the sun goddess case maybe, Amaterasu.
Yeah.
Is there any connection with Mithraism?
Thank you for your question. And if my understanding is correct, your question is about the relationship between ancient Zoroastrianism and Japanese Shintoism?
Indeed, yes.
Yes, of course, Japanese Shintoism's highest god, Amaterasu, is a sun god, but it is a female god. So, it was believed that from the 6th century, the Amaterasu is believed the highest god and the ancestor of Japanese emperor family. But as far as I know, the first arrival of Zoroastrians into Japan is the 7th century. So there may be no direct connection or direct relationship between the foundation of ancient Shintoism and arrival of Zoroastrian into Japan.
This actually concerns Mithraism more than Zoroastrianism. Mithraism, exactly. Because I understand that Amaterasu retires into a cave, is reborn from a rock. Now these are Mithraism concepts as well.
Yes.
Do you see any connection, or does it just happen to be that way?
I didn't have such idea, but it is a very interesting opinion for Japanese people. Yes. Yes.
And
your question raised new research, the possibility of new research.
Actually, Professor, you mentioned Gikyo Ito.
Yeah.
He had done research into this, you know.
No, in Japan,
yes,
no one has so much interest in Mithraism.
Yes, he has.
So we have almost no information about Mithraism, especially the ancient Japanese colors. So they couldn't count such possibility that Shinto is influenced from Mithraism. And after returning to Japan, I will talk about your opinion.
And do the consonants in the word Amaterasu, M-T-R-S, is that coincidental, or is it mean something else? What does it actually mean?
Amaterasu, yes. Yes, its pronunciation is, if we pick up the consonant M-T-S, It's right, but without the A, R.
Yes.
According to Japanese grammar, ama means the heaven, and terasu means illumination. So without the first A, it would become nonsense. So at this time, I can't imagine that the name of Amaterasu itself was influenced by the ancient Iranian god named Mitra. But of course, it is one possibility.
Only the coincidences are so many. It seems unwise to just drop one and say, no, it's pure coincidence. It could be more. I'm not saying it is, but it could be more than that.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for your answer. Shahin, can I ask, please, Professor Yan?
Yes, please.
Professor Yan, it's a rather delicate question as far as Chinese are concerned. Can you tell us, please, about Western China, the Tarim mummies?
Yes. Yes.
Please, I don't wish to embarrass you, but...
who are they?
Who are they?
Yeah.
Yes. Some archaeologists believe those mummies is the race is the Indo-European.
Have they dated them?
Yes, they have. They run from 1400 BC through about 800 or 900 BC. No, Victor says they took our order, right?
That's it, I mean. And the other point, it's not so much a question, it's just a point. During the Tang dynasty, in Western China, especially coming south now of the Gobi, or the Taklimakan is called, coming south in Dandan Oiluk, they found this beautiful plaque, which is in the British Museum, and is commonly called the Rustam Bodhisattva. Do you know anything about it? Have you seen this plaque? It's a beautiful one, actually. It's a Sassanian warrior in brocade, very rich brocade. And he is holding, I think, is it 4 hands? He's holding 4 different items in his hand. It's well worth examining, just purely for possible connections with the Sassanians coming east out of Iran and the Chinese going west into the Taklimakan. Because this comes from Dandan Oiluk, roughly 8th century.
I'm sorry, I didn't make such kind of...
And it might interest Dr. Aoki to know that the same panel was sent to Japan, to Nara, for a special exhibition. I just thought I'd mention it. Anyway, so why am I holding this?
Are there any more questions towards the back? I know that you are here, Joe, just to make sure that nobody's left up. We'll come to you next time.
And before you start, we will have to make our leave because we have a long way to go.
Right. Sorry about that. So, okay, Joe, go ahead.
Professor Aoki, in Japanese, there is no L. La. It's not pronounced, it's not written, nothing. In Avestan language, there is no la. Do you know any reason why? I mean, afterwards, la is written as ra. But that's an afterthought. What I'm saying is there any connection between Japanese and Avestan language not having la?
No.
I'm not linguist, but I research on religion.
Yes. As he says, he's an expert on religion rather than linguistics.
Sardine has an L.
Now, while the mic is being taken around, I'm going to take the liberty of a question. I'm going to ask Professor Yan if you can tell me, I have heard that the surname Liu, L-I-U, was used as an honorific for people who were descended from the Sassanian court. Is there any truth in that? Is there any history on that? Could you make any comment on the surname Liu?
I'm sorry, I didn't look up such kind of material. Maybe the girl over there. Yeah.
It's Lee.
Lee.
Can we have the question? This is an interesting question, and I think an interesting answer, maybe.
They didn't adopt Liu as their surname. They adopted Li, I, as their surname.
Who adopted Li?
And the Sassanian, the Persian peoples in Tang Dynasty.
And is that surname still to be found in amongst Chinese people? Would it
Yes,
suggest
you
that
can find it from some epigraphs excavated from Xi'an.
And today, are the people called Li still who have some Iranian descendants?
No, today it's so difficult to find the traces. Some scholars joked at me, I'm from Central Asia because my surname is B. In Sogdiana, there are some small kingdoms. Some people from Pelican, they adopted B as their Chinese surname, so why they joke at me, I'm from Central Asia. So it's difficult to find the relationship.
Right, so there was, but not today.
Yes.
I'm just going to pass the mic here because
Hi, yeah, I got a question for both professors. For Professor Aoki, you had mentioned that there was evidence of various Zoroastrian fire temples in, I believe it was end of Tang Dynasty into the Song Dynasty in various parts. And I'm curious if we know this because of historical documentation or if it's also because of some archaeological investigations. And regardless of that, I'd be interested if you could tell us anything you know about any current archaeological investigations in China to do, that are going on right now. And then, should I wait or have a question for Professor Yan as well? Okay.
Thank you for the question. I hope in future there some Chahan ruin or other Ahmad ruin will be discovered in China metropolis and the northern Sogdian and Persian colonies, but at this time, at present, we have no discovery of the Zoroastrian fire temple in the mainland of China. So, my thing okay?
Yeah, my second question is for Professor Yan. I know personally that of at least several Parsi families that have been going back to Shanghai over the last, 10, 15 years in an attempt to get back some of their property they had to leave behind, because I understand they all had to leave Shanghai in a hurry. I'm curious if you have had a chance to either meet or interview any of these Parsi families coming back, or if you know anything about that, this trying to get back some of their land and possessions, right now in terms of Parsi families.
First of all, I would like to know which kind of properties they want to get back. Personal or some
personal, just personal.
Okay. I heard about that event when I was visit Mumbai, and I come across some Parsis there, and they told me such things happened. But I was also told that they did not succeed in doing that. The problem is that it is very difficult for both sides to collect enough information about that. And I do have some case with some Chinese withdraw from Shanghai, and they come back after maybe 30 years later. They did get back their properties, but this is only because they have kept the complete materials or documents.
I have one quick follow-up question for both scholars. If you could give us a sense of what other scholars in the world are doing similar research to yours, and what kind of subjects and issues those scholars may be covering, just to give us a sense of other people doing similar work as your own, for both of you.
In Japan, Zoroastrian study is not so popular, but I know 4 students whose main subject was Indian Islamic culture, but they can read modern Persian and modern Gujarati. And now, because of my push, they shift their interest from Islamic culture to Zoroastrian culture. So in future time, from Japan, there will much Zoroastrian scholar whose attention focused on the Parsi culture in Western India will come. Good.
Actually, in China, we've got 3 groups of scholars who are interested in Parsi or Zoroastrian studies. One group is from Zhongshan University, which is located in the southern China. And they do a very good philological studies. There is a tradition like that. And the second group is from the northern China, like Beijing University and some other institute of archaeology, Academy of Social Sciences. Those people studied Parsi or the Zoroastrianism based on their discovery of the archaeological discoveries. And the third group is from our institute. We do research as a comparative religion.
Thank you. Are there any more questions that we have not taken yet? Well, that looks like we have satisfied most people's curiosity. But if I may ask you, since you had a question, to perhaps come up later on, I'm going to ask us to have a 5-minute comfort break and to round everything up with the final questions on the panel, basically all the speakers that we've had today. Professor Inson and Dr. Aoki kindly come back and sit at the front. We then have the last few minutes for any general questions if anybody wants to direct to anybody, because they've had time to think about things and they might have wanted to ask a question. Maybe your time will come later. Thank you. So 5 minutes break and then we'll see you. Thank you very much. In which case, this is the last session, and obviously some people had to leave to catch trains and buses, but we didn't want to leave any of you without the opportunity to ask any final questions. So it's an open floor now. Please make it clear who you would like to address, and please ask your questions. Anybody who's got any burning last questions? Because if you haven't, then we can simply round up. But I see one question at the back there. Yes, thank you.
Professor Insler, you said that we should try and encourage the younger population in our community to come forward and take up the mantle of learning about Zoroastrianism and what it really means for the Gathas. How do you propose that we should go about doing this?
Well, I had the honor to address Zoroastrian groups both in Bombay and here, and I often ask them, have you ever read the Gathas? right? Even in the worst possible translation. And the answer always is no. And they always want to say, what does Zoroaster say about this? What does Zoroaster say about that? And I say, it's very hard to give you an interpretation unless you at least have the basis, a base knowledge of what the text is, some notion of what the text is all about. So what I would first encourage you to do is to get the young people to read the Gathas. And there's no reason why you couldn't have a young group, younger person's discussion group about this. It seems to me it encourages interest in it, development of talk. You can invite people. There are many people here in London who have an educated knowledge about the history of Zoroastrianism, and they would happily participate in such groups. But there has to be some discussion. Right? Without any kind of discussion, it seems to me there cannot be any interest evoked, right, or provoked among younger people. So this is what I would do.
Actually, it's a follow-up question or statement. And Professor Inze, me for myself, for my part, I'm reading the Gathas in 10 years. In the beginning, I didn't understand a thing. I was just reading what it's trying to say. So how can I be good? It's really not easy. It takes a lot of time. And I think it's very difficult for young people to get started with it. And I think it just needs a bit more help from the communities. Like here, it means we need to encourage the young people. For example, we can learn a lot from the Christians, how the church is done. Young people singing, taking guitar, getting together, having a place to go. These sort of things. And just be open-minded. And because today, you can't get young people drawn to your faith if you are close-minded, conservative. So it needs to go on. As the Zoroastrian religion is progressive, right? So it has just to move on. And I think, unfortunately, I don't see much. And since years, I'm trying myself or in our group to do something, getting something up, but nothing's really happening. And we're dying out.
But you have a Zoroastrian center now in London. And it seems to me that you are involved with the Zoroastrian center.
It's split. It's what? I don't want to go into the details.
Yeah, okay.
The unity isn't there. But anyway,
Next question. Anybody else would like to ask a question? This in front of you. Just coming. Mike is just coming.
Late Professor Mary Boyce has a great influence on Western thinking scholars. How much influence has she got on you too?
On me?
You as well as the other Eastern scholars more.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I will talk about the Japanese problem. Yes, Professor Mary Boyce's famous book, The Zoroastrians, published in 1979, was translated into Japanese in 1983. And this book found good sales. And many Japanese average students read this Japanese translation of Mary Boyce's Zoroastrians. So Japanese university students was much influenced from Mary Boyce's book.
Of course, I read the book by Mary Boyce when I and one of my tutors who are working together. We are working together to write a book in Chinese, the history of Zoroastrianism. We read the Mary Boyce and we bought the Mary Boyce, almost all the published books. It's very difficult. It's not very easy for us to purchase the whole volumes of of the books in the first year of 1990s. It usually cost a very high price for us to buy it, because there is only one the book company to do the international trade of books, so it's very expensive for us. Even it is very expensive. We bought them and we collect almost all the books written by Mary Boyce.
Mary Boyce was an extraordinary scholar. Her history of Zoroastrianism in several volumes is the very accurate history of the various periods of the development of the religion, right, the political, social situation at all. My trouble with Mary is that she was not much of an interpreter that went beyond the word. In a certain sense, she was extremely literal in all of this, right? So if you ask me what her influence on me was, well, it's great reverence, right, for the scholarship embedded, right, in all of her careful sifting of the materials, their organization and everything. What is my influence on Mary Boyce? When she uses passages from the Gathas, she uses my translation, right, which of course I'm very much indebted to, right? She could have picked a lot of other junk, right? But she favored my junk before the others, right? And I'm very happy about that. But she was an extraordinary person, right? And to a large degree, I think a lot of the renewed interest, right, in the history of Zoroastrianism, particularly in Europe and America, is due to her extraordinary effort, and we all admired her for that.
Thank you. Okay, there's a question in the back there.
There's not a question.
Oh.
If I may add about Mary Boyce, not only did she did quite a lot in her lifetime, but even after she passed away, she passed all her bequests for the study of Zoroastrianism at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Yeah. Always the Zoroastrian community, indeed, all of us are highly indebted.
Yeah, thank you. Right. Any other? Yes, one question up the front here, please.
This question is for Shahin.
Could you just wait for the mic, because the people at the back may not hear you. And I think we will have to make this the penultimate question. There's one more question someone wants to ask after this.
A number of years ago, I was visiting Isfahan with a number of priests from Bombay. And they took us to a mosque in Maine, near the marketplace. It was called Masjid Jame or Masjid Jom'eh. And then these priests were wearing these white clothes and everything, and they asked me who they were. I said they were Zoroastrians. They've never seen Zoroastrians, and they thought they didn't exist. But they were quite surprised to see them in flesh. So the keeper took us downstairs into the basement and showed us where these pillars were. And I happened to have a photograph of that place downstairs. A few years later on, I went there and I wanted to go there. They said, no, such place does not exist at all, and they will not let me go to see it. I'm wondering if you have the first-hand experience of that.
The excavation done by Italian archaeologists in 1970s. However, when Islamic regime came to power, I think two or 3 years after they came to power, they filled the space completely. So there is no empty space there. You cannot go and visit anything. Although they don't deny it was used to be a fire temple under the Nizam of Mork Dome, but you cannot see it anymore.
Right. One final question, if there is one. Can you make it short? And then we'll just wrap up.
Can I ask you, it might be a personal question to the two gentlemen here. What was it that got them interested in Zoroastrian studies or religion or studying it or whatever? In the first instance, what was
Thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you.
In my case, I started my career as an Islamic studies student in Tokyo University, but continuing to study about Islamic mysticism in the 16th and 17th century, I met the Zoroastrian or Zoroastrian mystic named Azar Kaivan from Shiraz, and he died at Patna in Hindustan in 1618.
85.
85, yes, age 85. So, through this other Kaiwan and other Kaiwan school, my interest shifted from Islamic mysticism, from Iranian Islamic mysticism to the Zoroastrian mysticism. Then after that, I continued to study about Zoroastrianism more and more to ancient times.
The first time I hear about Zoroaster, it is from a book written by Nietzsche. Because I was educated as in the Department of Philosophy, but later on I was affiliated to some Institute of Religious Studies, and it is because we. After the opening of China, it is very necessary for us to know, to understand something more about the outsider, especially about the various kinds of religion in the world.
Thank you. Well, as I said, that should be the penultimate. I'm sorry, but I think the time has come now. It's just going past 4 o'clock. So the time has come to pass the mantle over to Sunnu, who is going to say the final few words.
Thank you. I hope that you will join me and the WZO, the World Zoroastrian Organization, in thanking our eminent guests for presenting their scholastic papers that help us annually to get a little closer and a greater understanding of our religion, our culture, and our history. So very, very grateful. I am new to the World Zoroastrian Organization, but I believe that Professor Stanley Inzler is a very well-known guest here, and I have been told to thank him profusely for continuing to show an interest in our community and in fact in encouraging us to discover more about our own faith and our own history. And of course it's intriguing to have people come from as far away as China and Japan to tell us not only that they are studying our history and religion, but that our religion has gone so far afield that we didn't actually know about it. And we hope that they will look more into what happened, what exactly was the nature of that Chinese Zoroastrianism, and come back again and tell us more about it. So I want to thank Dr. Takeshi Aoki and also Professor Kejia for bringing us more into the 20th century with the history of the Parsis in Shanghai. And I think that I have some kind of DNA relationship with the Chinese, so it was very interesting to listen to him. And of course, when we have our annual gathering, we try to have a mix of people from different regions, preferably a gender balance, and always to try and have a Zoroastrian, a Zartushti scholar amongst us. And today we are very lucky, very fortunate to have Chairperson and Pallav speak to us about the history of our religious sites and our temples and what befell them, and all his detective, forensic and archaeological work in discovering this. So thank you very much, all of you. And we hope that you will give us your papers, because this is something apparently very elusive. We get these eminent guests and then they disappear without giving us their papers. So I hope you will all promise to give us a copy of your paper. I particularly want to say that for me, Professor Stanley Inzler's speech about Zoroastrian precepts was really very important. It's something that maybe I should have heard when I was a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old. These basic things need to be known by us, and I hope that we will be inspired, along with people who've spoken from the audience, to take this further and maybe develop something amongst younger people in studying our religion and our history. I want to thank the people who have helped to organize this conference, and particularly the people who've chaired these sessions, Noshir Umrigar, Farooq Vajifdar, also for his questions, and Shahin Bekhradnia for actually doing much more than what she has done today. She's, the inspiration behind the gathering of these scholars today, so I particularly want to thank her. I want to thank our guest, Celine Lee, for coming along at short notice to translate in case we needed a translation, as we did of the poem. So thank you very much. May I ask Godafri Irani to please come forward and
just a little joking.
Thank you very much. We cannot leave today without inviting Khushi Kapadia, our very devoted secretary, who is the lifeblood of the organization, because she gets people like you to join and help us to grow the organization. Please, Khushi, come and do us the honor. Of course, we have our president Darius here, who's just about does everything that there is to do. And not to forget our chairman, Sami Bhiwandiwala, who couldn't be here today for the very first time, I believe, in all these 26 or 27 years because of his granddaughter's 3rd birthday, which he dared not miss. So we want to think of him and thank him for all the good work that he has been doing for the last few years. And thank you very much, all of you, for coming year in and year out. And please do bring some more people next time. I think we've nearly reached the number 100, and we hope to go over it next time. So thank you very much, and thank you.